I am here to tell you a story of a woman I knew long ago. This woman was sick. She had a heart disease. Her heart disease was getting really worse and worse, and her physical condition was not improving. And normally, women with heart disease are not allowed to get pregnant. They're not supposed to get pregnant. But this woman wanted a child. What she did was that she kept on trying to get pregnant. She even tried more than 4 times, despite doctors telling her not to do that. Her spouse, loved ones, everyone tried to remind her that she shouldn't be pregnant, but she kept on trying to get pregnant. Until one day, while she was sleeping, she died. Her heart failed her. So, I know that a lot of ideas are coming into your mind right now, thinking of like, what are the reasons actually behind this woman insisting on getting pregnant? And I know what they could be. I think, or I believe, that I know what's going on in your mind. You might be thinking that she is so traditional and so naive and so, I don't know what, like she is so much of a slave to her society that she wants a child. But the fact is that this woman, it's not like she didn't have any children. She actually had 2 daughters. But she didn't have a boy child. So for a boy child, this woman kept on insisting. So I know, then, again, you might be thinking, oh, maybe it's her families, their families, I mean, both of them. That maybe her husband was like pushing for it, or like even trying to, you know, have a boy child because he wanted his legacy to continue through history and all of these, you know, things that we have as cultural. But none of these things were true. And I'll leave you for now, just for a second, to think of like the actual reasons why a woman who is sick and physically unable to get pregnant want a boy child so much. In fact, it's just society. If you want to know why is making what are the reasons that are making a woman who can't get pregnant insist on doing that and actually bring about her own death, her early death. Let me tell you more information about this woman. Let's have the full picture. This woman died at the age of 32. She was still young. This woman was a teacher. She was educated, she was cultured, she loved books, she used to travel alone. She was liberated. She was an actual activist. She wanted to free her own country, Palestine. She wanted to better her society. She was different. And those reasons made a man fall in love with her, and they got married for those reasons. And now I'm making this story so more complicated for you, and I'm aware of this. And it might be a little bit confusing for now to just think of like, what are the reasons who would make a woman who is cultured, educated, and a book reader, and all of these things, still want to insist on like bringing her own death again, and still want a boy child? So it is society. I have a piece of information also to give to you, that this woman did not have a brother. Her mother did not have a brother. And that made their lives really hard. So she thought that for her 2 daughters to have a better life, they need a brother, you know? It would really facilitate things. It would just, you know, they would be protected. They would have someone to support them and all of this. This woman's name was Kifah Sabah, and that woman was my mother. I lost my mother when I was 7 years old. My sister was only 4. And I told you all the good things about her. And the very question I got when I was very young is that, why did she do it, you know? Is she stupid? Is that selfishness? Like, why did she do that? And then I grow up, and I look around me, and I observe society. And I ask myself, so is it like really the fact that we women need men to be protected? Is that what it is? Or that we actually need men to feel complete, fulfilled? That I can't walk in the streets as a woman without having a man by my side? Is that what it is? It's not. In fact, we just need safe spaces. And that is why I am here today to argue that what we need is safe spaces. Now, the term safe spaces has been used by many activists, human rights activists, feminists, and a lot of people who are demanding social change. And they're talking about safe spaces in the very literal meaning. So it is sad, yes, that we still need actual, physical, public, safe spaces to live. It is sad that women don't have full equal access to public spaces as men. I'm talking about places where women are free to access support, information, use technology, access opportunities, be safe, be empowered. So all of these things, which are an actual rights for all human beings. It is sad that in our societies, we all know that streets are not safe for all women. Schools are not safe for all women. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about schools, gyms, pools, streets, all of these places, parks that need to be safe. But that is the very, very literal meaning of what safe spaces are. I am here today, at the end of this very day, with you guys really exhausted and trying to comprehend what I'm trying to say. So what I'm trying to say today is that we need to demand social and cultural safe spaces. So it's not just about physical safe spaces, it's more than that. Now, what safe spaces are seems to be very obvious to all of us. Like the fact that it is a human right being to walk, speak, talk, exist equally and normally and be safe. You can just walk in the streets without being attacked is a very basic human right, and we all agree on. But there's something that is more than that. What I'm here today to say is something bigger than that. I think that we lack the very basic right that is to be listened. I still believe that we are still striving to be listened and heard. Everyone wants to talk about something. Everyone wants to tell you their stories. I'm talking about parents. I'm talking about professors, university professors, schools and the boys in the kindergarten, boys and girls who are working in salons. Everyone wants to tell you a story. Like taxi drivers, you get into the car and they start telling you their life stories. So the real thing is that people want to tell you their stories, but they need to be safe to share and tell you that experience, whether it was success or failure. They just need to feel okay to tell you things. So in here today, I have just been given the chance, a good venue, a safe space to be here and not be attacked and tell you the story about my mother. And I am here today to tell you all to keep safe spaces where people can express themselves and tell you their stories. So when people are telling you stories, you should listen. That's one. And two, share your own. Share your own stories. Out of my own belief and research and thesis and a project I was working on, that sharing our stories is actually sharing our gender stories. I have a strong belief that every story about us is eventually a gender story. It is you because you are a woman who is named this, who comes from this family, who lives with this background, whose economic situation is that. You are where you are today. So those stories who made us who we are is the actual stories, the stories of our life that we need to share more and learn from one another. So that is the second step. We share, we listen, and then we learn. But how do we learn? We think critically. I truly think that even if there are a lot of stories, like the story of my mother, and a lot of stories around motherhood and having children or not being able to have children and all of these things, so all of these stories are true, but they're not the only stories that we have. And you can't pretend or assume that you understand all stories. You can't pretend like, oh, I know what happened to you. I know why you are today. I know why you're angry. I know where you're sexist, but that's not the right way to deal with this. That we should at least, like, you know, put assumptions away and listen. Because the reality about gender in our region, as I believe, is too complicated. Too complicated to be understandable to everyone or accessible to everyone. And that in order for us all to understand these, we need to learn from our shared experiences. And that is where, in 2016, I did have finished my thesis back then. And my thesis was trying to investigate the influence of modern life on our gender stories, which is very academic. But then I had so many questions, despite all the good research output that I had, and like really good defense on my thesis, and I'm using that, I still had so many questions to answer, and I didn't get them through books. So I started another project, which was called ShareYourGenderStory. That is very basic, because I didn't know what to expect. I just went to people, friends and other people. Sometimes I was like in a cafe, and people would come to me and be like, what are you filming? Why are you interviewing those people? And they would say, can you interview me? I have a story to tell you. So people have so much stories. Give them a venue. Let's listen. The amount of things I have learned about gender and the reality we're living just by interviewing people, just by sitting there, not actually talking. It's not me who was doing the talking. It's all the stories about them. Everyone was talking about themselves. And they used to go for like literally like minutes and minutes, and people used to go for half an hour just telling me something. They used to talk about their domestic violence. They talked about sexual orientations. They talked about, you know, having human rights. Sometimes they talked about good equality of gender that they have experienced. So sometimes it's not always like stories of struggle and oppression. And it is true, like my colleagues, other speakers were here today to tell you that there are good stories and there are bad stories, or there are good sides and bad sides. So you can't assume that you know all of them. So let them speak for themselves, and don't have like assumptions in your head. So what's making our gender reality is so difficult? Like, why is that so complicated? It is the fact that I am here to argue that globalization and the modern life that we're living in right now, or living under, is actually fragmenting our identities. The identity of my mother and other women I have met are fragmented. But that is a big claim, to say that our identity, including me and many of us, are not one coherent unit of identity. They're more of fragments and less than one. So that is a big claim. I'm not talking that we have like different personalities and like we have different like realities and all of this, but in fact we have less than one gender identity. So what's making our reality complicated is the fact that globalization actually interacts with pre-existing oppressions and systems of oppression. One is heteronormativity, and that is like the actual standard, you know, concept of like what a man and a woman in a family is like. And then patriarchy, and that is male dominance within a society. But these are influencing specifically women more than anyone else. They're controlling her identity and her body. They're controlling her existence. They're not letting her be. And then comes globalization with all those economic situations and racial problems and a lot of like other like obstacles with like trying to comprehend technology and like living modern life, which is complicated. So all of these together are like forming this one matrix of power. And this matrix is kind of like preserving certain gender norms. Now, these gender norms are kind of like putting us in this kind of like a circle. And so who's making those gender norms? Like, who is trapping us in those gender norms? It's us. When we're preserving those that already exist gender norms, kind of a result from this kind of a diagram, this power relation in our societies are keeping us in this circle. So this circle is going into this movement, and then any eruption of this circle is resistance. True. So if you see oppression and you stand up, you speak up, and you say, this is oppression, this is inequality, and shouldn't be happening, you're doing resistance. But what we need to do is something more than that. What we need to do is the fact that we need to celebrate our indifferences and our fragmentation. So if we don't really fit in this circle, it's okay. Just be happy. You don't have to fit in this circle. So to make it simple, there are women who can't be mothers. Let them be. And there are women who don't want to be mothers. It's okay. So what we have to do is that we have to think critically about all social forms of oppression and those power relations. When we think about them critically, we analyze them, and we realize that our identities are completely formed constantly, all the time, in everyday life through those, like within this system of power. It is also important maybe to mention that if you are functioning within this system, it's okay, you're operating within this system. But replicating, which means reproducing gender identity, gender norms and gender forms in the way they are today, is actually recreating the same domination. They're creating the same relations of domination. Let me go to another example. Did you know that in 2017, women in Jordan, unemployment rate for women in Jordan is 77.1%. And these women are holders of bachelor degrees. So educated women, unemployment rate is 77%. For males of the same category, it's 26%. That is a huge gap. So I have just proposed an issue, and I think there is a need to propose a solution. So on the road to gender equality, what should we do? The first step, and I'm quoting Judith Butler, who is a philosopher and a gender theorist that I truly believe in, and she says something in a very simple way, but it says so much. She says that the first step towards nonviolence is surely an absolute obligation that we all bear, is to begin to think critically and ask people to think the same. In very simple words, if you're walking in the street and you see a woman who is laughing loudly and shouting, you would look and you're mesmerized, you're surprised, and some people would go far and be like saying, this is very inappropriate behavior. But if it was a man, people would look and look away. At this very exact moment, what you need to do is that you need to pause and think critically. Why is her forwardness making it so inappropriate, but for a man it's okay? So those very simple things, like not being paid equally in the company you're working on, or like, not being able to walk in the street and not be safe. So think about these issues critically, and bear that burden on your shoulders, and be thinking that you have to educate yourself. So if you think critically about things and you analyze them and you don't take them as for granted, and you have to question them, When once you question, you want to look for answers and you want to look for reasons. And once you do, you're educating yourself. So the fact that things worked out eventually for me, and I have two brothers now. And they didn't make my life any easier. I made their lives easier. I was the person who gave them support. My brother comes to my library and takes the books I stole from mom's library and reads them. He reads about gender, he reads about society, he reads about issues, he reads literature, he reads about leftism. And these are my books, and my brother got them from me. So simply, what I am trying here to say is that the law doesn't change culture. And if we always keep producing laws to rule our lives, using politics to do that for us, it's not going to work. We need to change individual awareness, and that would definitely then change the law. Thank you. That's it for me.